Ghosthunter Dan was leading a session, and we were outside. It's actually pretty windy, so we didn't know if the EVPs were going to come across, so we switched to the Ghost Box. And we're at a site called the Battleground. That's what we always call it. It's actually the site of Stillman's Run for the Black Hawk War. And without getting too much into the history, about a dozen militiamen unfortunately lost their lives in that site. And Ghosthunter Dan had asked the question, did you guys die over here, or was it over by the creek? And then immediately the answer was, over by the creek.
Wow, that would be kind of eerie right there, because I'm still kind of skeptical on ghost boxes because I have a vast electronic background and I know it zooms through the frequencies and all that stuff, but I've actually heard some stuff where that the coincidental would be just so high that I don't know what to say.
Yeah, you really don't. I mean, some of these answers, they're direct answers to the question. I mean, how can you actually throw that out 100% without saying, well, it's possible,
Wow.
So we've had other ones. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of them. I know the one for Starved Rock, though, was especially interesting because we were inside the cave. And that cave is under, give or take, 90 feet of limestone. You're not going to get radio waves under 90 feet of limestone.
Especially in AM, you wouldn't.
Right. We're not even getting cell phone reception inside there. So where were the words coming from? And everything's running backwards, like I said. So in what way do you get November 14th running backwards in AM under 90 feet of stone?
Wow. That is eerie. I mean, have you ever been scared on any of your adventures when you've been out ghost hunting? Has anything ever kind of like you went home and you're scared maybe something followed you back home or anything like that? Or are you scared of that could happen to you?
That has happened numerous times. There's a place out in the middle of nowhere. That's, north central Illinois. I want to say the actual name is called Mayfield Church, but we always just called it the Creepy Church. The church is creepy. Like, you just get a really weird vibe when you'd go past this church. So, and again, this was probably 6-7 years ago. We were kind of hanging out at the cemetery outside. Obviously, we don't go into the cemetery unless we have permission. Outside by the fence with an EVP recorder and trying to just get contact with something. And something, I mean, I know you haven't seen Dan. He's a really big guy. Big guy. And something almost pulled him into the cemetery. So we end up going back, again, maybe a year later, a couple months later, 8 months later. And as soon as we start pulling up to the cemetery, he starts feeling a little sick. He's like, oh, man, I'm just not feeling this one. So normally we use the, if you're not feeling it, we're leaving, no matter what. Trust your gut. And this time he said, no, you guys go ahead. I'll stay in the car. It's fine. So we pull up to the church, and we still park on the road. And according to Dan later on, he's telling me the closer he got to that church, the more sick he felt. So we all get out. We start taking pictures and kind of set up the recorder and everything. And I'm walking up to the church to take a picture in a second-story window, and he's just, stomach's hurting, his legs, he's just miserable. And finally, he starts kind of saying, guys, I think we should go. And I go to take a picture in the window, and in the window, in the flash of the picture, I see two people staring down at us.
Now that would be scary.
So, yeah. So I think, oh boy, like, hair up on the arms, the back of the neck, everything. So that was the first time where I said, okay, I think it's time we go now. So we go back to the car. Everyone gets in. We leave. 5 minutes later, Dan's perfectly fine. Not feeling sick whatsoever. I start looking through the pictures in the camera, And there on that picture of that window, you can make out the silhouette of a man on the right and a woman on the left, but they weren't actually there.
Okay, so they weren't like people just living in there,
Nope.
Squatters or anything.
But when I saw them, they were people, but they didn't come across as people in the camera. Now, fast forward a good couple months, and now all of a sudden, Dan has a male attachment. And then the attachment moves on to his daughter and haunts his daughter, stands in her doorway, moves stuff. Dan was telling me about how there was one time he was looking out his window, looking for his younger son, and the swing starts swinging on its own. No wind. The swing was just going. It was almost like it was taunting Dan, knowing that Dan's looking right out the window. And that was a problem for both of us, really, for a good couple months until we finally had to get it cleansed out of there.
Well, you got to be careful because, I've had other people on my show where they went out with a priest, actually in one case, to cleanse a house and, do whatever they do with somebody that is possessed. And when they left, she went home and she didn't feel right. And then, like, in the middle of the night, she felt like somebody scratching her, and she woke up and she had all these, scratches. And her friend started thinking, well, like maybe she's doing this on her own. And
sleeping and scratching herself or something.
Right. Or hurting herself without realizing it. Then, while he was standing there, all of a sudden, down her arm, a scratch appeared right in front of him where it started bleeding.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean...
Yeah, that one's a little scary.
Yeah, you got to be careful. I'll tell you a little story in my case. This is one... I've been in paranormal radio. I started in 1976, but I got out of it for a while. I got burned out on radio a couple times, actually, through the careers. And I started managing a couple, professional camera stores. And one of them was in a building that was built around the 1870s in Tacoma, Washington. And originally, the building was a bar in the basement. It was right off where the ships would come in and all that stuff. And the sailors would, come into it. And it was a hotel.
Port bar.
Yeah. And the upstairs was a brothel. And and that went on to around 1890s, 1900, and then that changed. And I don't know what happened after that point. But, I had all these employees. I worked there for like 16 years. And I would, hire, people. And some of the people I hired was like an ex-Rangers. I had an ex-Navy SEAL. We had a basement downstairs, which was originally the bar in the 1800s. We used for storage, for our other two stores. And it was a huge basement, not very well lit. But my employees would come up, and say, well, something is haunted. And I go, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I seen things move, or I heard somebody talking, or I was touched, or all this stuff. And I started thinking, well, people's imagination. And then, because we had like 5 or 6 salesmen, and, some come and go and you get new ones. So, rumors just keep circulating, and I, being the general manager, I never really had to go down to the basement very often. So I stayed away from it. The owner absolutely wouldn't go into the basement at all unless somebody was with him. I could never figure that out till something happened to me. After I was there almost 16 years, I used to also, repair cameras. I went through and learned, how to repair and clean sensors and all this stuff. And that's what, one of the jobs I did there at night when, everybody left, I would sit there and clean people's sensors on digital SLR cameras.
By yourself?
By myself, because I didn't want, air movement. I didn't want any dust circulating and all that stuff. And still, on the sales floor, it went up because they removed a couple of stories of the building in the 60s because it was unsafe. So they took off probably 6 stories of the building. But up in the second floor was the office. Then it was a 3rd floor. And then the next floor after that, And if you went into them, naturally there was no rooms; they were all gutted out. But you could look on the on the wood, and you could see where the rooms were. Where the 2x4s originally were attached to the flooring. The windows were bricked off and all that stuff. It was weird. I was down there, and it started really funny. I was down there, well, a couple of things before that. I'm going to backtrack. One day, one of my employees literally refused to go down in the basement. Absolutely refused to go down and bring stock up. He goes, I'm not going down there. You can fire me. So I got mad, and I stormed down there.
Oh, wow.
And I walked down there, and I smelled lilac. And I walked another foot. I didn't smell nothing. Okay, that was the first time. And then maybe a week or two later, I went down there. And I'm walking down one of the aisles. And somebody tapped me on the shoulder to the point it hurt. And I swung around, and I was about ready to deck somebody, okay? It really upset me. There was nobody there. Absolutely nobody there.
Oh, jeez.
And I started thinking, well, this is getting kind of strange. But then I kind of blocked it out. But then it kept on going worse. I'd be sometimes down there till 11, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, working on cameras and doing all this stuff. Next to my office downstairs was still the staircase from the hotel going up to, the offices and all that stuff. Oh, next to us was the Bank of California, which they moved out about 5 years before that. Next to us, on the other side, there was nobody there at all. Now, I would be in my office, and I'd hear, all of a sudden, the first time I heard one person walking up the set of the stairs. And I started thinking, well, that's kind of odd because I got the doors, deadbolted on the inside, so nobody else, the owners couldn't come in there. Nobody else could come in, without knocking on the doors. So, I'm figuring, wow, and I went out and looked, and there was nobody there. So I kind of brushed that off of my mind, I didn't want my mind to start to, thinking about, strange things. It was, I just kind of said, that's my imagination. Then, a few days later, I was down there. I didn't hear just one footstep, but I heard maybe 2 or 3 people walking up the stairs. And I started thinking, and you could hear the creaks and the steps. Because the steps were wood, varnished wood. You could actually hear the shoes going up it. Then it got to the point where I actually heard people muffled talking, like men and women, going up the stairs. And that's when I said,
oh, wow.
I said, you know what? I said, I'm not doing this anymore. You hire some other, you send the equipment out to, I don't care where to get, I'm not staying there after closing time. That was it. And I quit pretty much after that. But then I did do some research and found out back around in the 1890s, there was a prostitute. It was killed upstairs and cut up in little pieces and put into a, what do you call those, chests that they used to, pack stuff and, ship stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where they found her body or parts of her body. And I started thinking, well,
oh, geez.
Yeah, and then downstairs, too, when I was doing checking, too, there was a couple multiple shootings and stabbings in the bar where people got killed. So, I mean, it was, if anything is haunted, that's the only place I've ever ran into anything like that. But I'll tell you what, a few years ago, I went back down there because the business failed because, camera stores are not really around much anymore. And that store,
not, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that store actually started in the 1930s, so it was there for a long time. I went in there, and now it's a title insurance company in there. And, I walked in there and talked to the receptionist. I talked to the office manager, and I said, I used to be the general manager of the prior business that was in here. And it's kind of curious if anything ever strange happened in this place. And they go, yeah. We hear footprints, we hear the, footsteps, we hear, muffled talking and all this stuff. And I go, okay, so it wasn't my imagination. And then actually too, when I finally quit, I confronted the owner and I said, why don't you go downstairs? And he goes, you know the answer.
Uh-huh.
So that's my experience and, of ghosts and things like that.
Yeah.